On this episode, we're going to be talking about working with the disabled and help and reaching out to people who have suffered with disabilities. I believe this is a subject that is grossly neglected and extremely misunderstood, the plight and the suffering of those who have had to fight and deal with disabilities throughout their entire life. They are often isolated. They often have extreme boredom. They often live in fear of being socially ostracized. They're often cast aside in society. Even among the clergy, I have found on multiple occasions to be this shocked about their gross arrogance about this problem. And this is not a video about, like, we all have dreams and aspirations. So let me explain this through a metaphor. Normal people have dreams and aspirations. Some people want to become rock stars. Some want to be professional athletes. But most of these dreams will not come to pass. We're not talking about some baby boomer who buttered his bacon and smokes 2 packs of cigarettes a day and wonders why he never became a professional athlete, or the person who bought a guitar and never played it and wonder why he's not into rock stardom. But a normal person will achieve a full-time job. Most of them will marry, have a family, own a house. These things, to many people with disabilities, that is their rock stardom. That is their big dream, to own a house, to have a full-time job. But it's so difficult for them. These dreams may not come to pass. To them, that is becoming a movie star. That is becoming the rock star. That is becoming the professional athlete. Their lives are very often a couple of notches down, and it is very hard on them. And this is what it really gets me with many people who are in the clergy, to say, well, there's different people in the Bible. The Apostle Paul he was celibate, he wasn't married, but the Apostle Paul lived a vibrant life. He wrote books, he traveled, he built up the churches. He was very important to the early church community. Many people with disabilities, they will never marry. And or finances. Some of the clergy will say, well, you can focus more on spiritual things. Just because you're poor, instead of focusing on money and wealth and owning your own house, telling that to a disabled person is like telling an immigrant who is starving the evils about morbid obesity. Honestly, if you're hungry, you don't have to worry about the sin of morbid obesity. You just want to eat and have a safe place. So to tell a poor person who is disabled, which one only needs to spend some time working or volunteering with the homeless population to see their disabilities, to tell them to focus on more spiritual things, and lecturing them about the evils of money and greed and being selfish and, don't be like this movie star who owns like 20 houses, or don't be like Donald Trump. They're so poor it doesn't even apply to them. Again, the analogy of telling the starving person the evils of morbid obesity, it just doesn't help. And I think as a society, we're really neglecting those individuals with disabilities, and we're really failing to minister to them and to help them. In fact, the amount we do very often, I think, does more harm than good in a lot of the cases.
Well, you care about this.
Absolutely.
You've experienced a bit of it.
I love it.
I'm rather fond of Jean Vanier.
Mm-hmm.
Jean Vanier, the son of one of the Governor Generals of Canada, I think a 20th century saint. He died this last year. John Vanier devoted his life to thinking about these matters. And he began a community in France, which is called L'Arche. And then that developed, people got interested. So there are L'Arche houses in many cities around the world, including here in Edmonton. John Vanier sees this matter quite differently, even differently than some of the way you put it.
Okay.
The notion of ministering to people with disabilities is itself problematic.
Okay.
Jean Vanier talked about how all of us have limitations. If you want to use the language of disability, all of us have disabilities.
Okay.
If you want to use the language of special needs, all of us have special needs. Now, some people, those special needs are very overt, and you really spoke about some of that.
Yep.
I have several people in my family who have very serious special needs. A child who's now a young adult who will never talk, who will never walk, things of that nature. So, I mean, these can become very, very dramatic. But what Vanier did was based on his sense that people with disabilities or with special needs that are overt are really far less different from everybody else than we tend to imagine.
Okay, go
It's
on.
just that we don't see it in so many people. And so what he did was shaped a community of people to live together.
Okay.
He said, when you live with people who others have considered to have disabilities and who may have particular kinds of limitations, and you live with them and make your life with them. It's about making your life with them. This is transformative, likely to those people, but what's most important and what we can most readily see, it's transformative to the people that live with them. So one of the tragedies of our society, it's sort of a gift and a tragedy, is that we have tended to remove people with special needs into particular silos.
Yeah. To house them or
House them in some fashion. And we
it's
do
almost jail light. It's
Right,
we
yeah.
don't want to see you. You don't belong to society. You are now the other.
And as you pointed
I mean,
out,
it's-
many of them end up in prison.
Yes.
So here's, why has that occurred? Well, in part that's occurred because modern life has been very hard on community. We have really shattered natural community by the way in which we organize time and space.
Oh yes. Yes.
And so we've tried to find some institutional ways to address that. But Vanier's point, and I think it's really central to thinking about this, Vladimir, is that every human being, no matter what their condition or how they've behaved, is the image of God. They all are a deep and profound mystery. And living present to others, no matter who they are, is always a deep and profound revelation. They help unveil aspects of our own life. And together we experience healing. Together we experience times of communion and spontaneity and love. So I think it's important to try and find ways to express concerns about these matters and to do what we're able to see that in our society and in our particular communities, we care for each other and for everyone properly. but not that we minister to them,
Okay.
but rather that we live with them
Mm-hmm.
and recognize that they minister to us too.
Mm-hmm.
That's a mutual phenomenon. I recall Henry Nouwen, the rather famous spiritual writer. He was a psychologist at Harvard for a period of time, Dutchman, fine education, lovely sensibility, profound Christian writer. Most people were unaware of the fact. I mean, he has a big reputation in Catholic circles and big reputation among many Protestants, including evangelicals, who love the way he writes about the spiritual life. But most of them were unaware of the fact, this man had never married, they were unaware of the fact that he also had his struggles, part of which was that he was attracted to men.
Because he was a homosexual.
Yes. And so this was a struggle for him, and he worked
Mm-hmm.
at it and tried to come to some understanding of it. And Henry Nouwen spent the last part of his life living in a large house, living with people who most people saw as having disabilities.
Yep.
And Henry Nouwen says, and this is a man who was at the top of his game, I suppose you would say, that in many ways this was the happiest time of his life. It was the time of his life when he experienced the greatest love and the most fulfillment in his life, because he was making his life together with others who were very different.
Mm-hmm.
So there are things we can do to be helpful and to make changes within social policy and all that sort of thing in our society. But all of that, to my mind, is secondary to what the real call is. The real call is to shape our life so we can be servants to others who even in their special needs will be profound servants to us. It's the way life works.
Mm-hmm.
For all of us, whether we're deemed to have special needs or not. You have been a gift to me.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the way life is. And the tragedy of hiving people off, the tragedy of designating them as other,
Yep.
is
The short school bus. The
well,
institution life when you become an adult.
you know, these things all require their particular assessment, but in general, that's really a terrible, dark way to view it.
Mm-hmm.
It's we are born into this world together with all kinds of people,
Mm-hmm.
and our call is to seek to be present to them, not simply because we somehow can offer them something, but because, as we know from the Gospels, every single person we meet in
Mm.
life is a revelation of another way of understanding the image of God
Mm-hmm.
and the presence of the Holy Spirit in the world.